What if I told you there was an MLB player nobody wanted but ended up destroying everyone? A player who led the league in home runs twice, made 6 straight All-Star games, and is the owner of one of the most iconic bat flips in baseball history. All of this after he's passed around team after team throughout the early part of his career. This is of course the legendary José Bautista, and to find out how he became one of the league's best hitters despite nobody wanting him for the greater part of his career, we need to go back to where it all started. That being when the Pittsburgh Pirates selected him in the 20th round of the 2000 draft, but it was with the Baltimore Orioles where Bautista would make his MLB debut 4 years later, when he was brought in during the club's opening day contest against the Boston Red Sox as a pinch runner following a double by David Segui to start the 8th inning, later scoring on an error by the shortstop Cesar Crespo to extend the Orioles' lead by 5. But instead of receiving more of an opportunity in the following weeks, he was instead placed on waivers, being picked up by the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. Then, after a short spell in Florida, he was off to the Kansas City Royals, and finally at the trade deadline he was shipped to the New York Mets, who just minutes later flipped him back to the team it all started with, the Pittsburgh Pirates. It was a crazy few months for Bautista, who never got the opportunity with any of the teams that acquired him. But now back with the Pirates, he was finally able to debut with them and featured in 23 games down the stretch and 11 more in 2005, before receiving everyday reps as a third baseman and corner outfielder the following year. During this season he showed decent power numbers in terms of ISO, which is a stat that measures raw power by only taking extra base hits and the type of extra base hit into account. His 185 figure was higher than guys like Robinson Cano and Ryan Zimmerman, who both eclipsed 50 extra base hits that season. So with the thought of Bautista continuing to develop and hone in on his power, it outweighed his mediocre defensive ability. But after posting 2 more below average seasons with the Pirates from 2007 to 2008, the club decided to ship him off to the Toronto Blue Jays for a player to be named later. Now, at the time of this deal, the Blue Jays sat 66-61, 7 games back for the final wildcard spot. But Bautista wasn't brought in to be the saving grace of this team. General manager JP Ricciardi even mentioned when acquiring him that this guy isn't like Mike Schmidt. He's not going to come out here and hit 40 home runs, but he's a guy that can hit double-digit home runs for us in a spot where right now we need some help, making it clear there were no long-term plans for his acquisition. Instead, he was brought in just to play third base for a few weeks as the club's regular Scott Rowland was dealing with an injury, giving him the opportunity for everyday reps with his new club. But Bautista did not seize the opportunity, posting a mere .214 average and .648 OPS in 21 games. At this point, he had just finished his age 27 season with lackluster numbers to show for it, including a .239 average and 88 OPS plus. It also didn't help that his defense wasn't anything to get too excited about either, so with both sides of the ball considered, it should be no surprise that he posted negative -2.9 WAR during his first 5 years of his career. For reference, that was the 5th worst mark among field players during this time, behind guys you probably have never heard of, which gives a little more insight on why he was moved 7 times before his 28th birthday. He was one of the worst players in baseball, but everything started to change during the 2009 season. Entering the year on the Major League bench, Bautista was assigned to back up Rowland at third, as was the 2 corner outfielders in Alex Rios and Adam Lind. This helped him get spot starts here and there, and throughout April he was hitting well with a .317 average and an .868 OPS. However, throughout the following months, his numbers regressed, never once hitting above .231. But as the season drew to a close, the Chicago White Sox claimed Rios off waivers, Lind was assigned to a DH role by the Jays, and Marco Scudero, the successor to Rowland, was hurt. This gave Bautista the opportunity to become an everyday player, where he finally had a chance to get a feel for what his hitting coaches were trying to make him change in his swing. But instead of me explaining the adjustment, let's let the man himself do it.
Because I used to get started so late that the only way that I could try to be on time sometimes was to be quick. So this was my speed. So by the time I tried to come around, the ball was already on top of the plate and everything was so late.
By getting ready for the pitch quicker, it allowed Bautista to turn on baseballs and finally start tapping into his power to the pull side. This was important because for the first 5 years of his career, he was not great at hitting the ball to the opposite field, managing 0 homers and a .664 OPS. This was also the case when hitting the ball up the middle with a .677 OPS. However, from his pull side, we can see exactly where he thrived with 33 home runs and an over 1,300 OPS. This is why his hitting coaches were pleading for him to make the this adjustment, and heading into the final month of the season, it finally started to click for him. In September, he had his best month of his professional career, managing 10 home runs and a 944 OPS in 30 games. For reference, in the 83 games prior, he hit just 3 home runs with an OPS of 667, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this stretch saved his career, because at the end of the year, there's a great chance he would have been let go by the club, and at 28 years old, it would have been hard for him to grab a major league gig elsewhere. But instead, after his late season success, the Blue Jays opted to re-sign him for $2.4 million ahead of 2010, and as we all know, this wasn't your ordinary campaign. Entering the 2010 season, the Blue Jays had just traded away future Hall of Famers in Scott Rowland to the Cincinnati Reds and Roy Halladay to the Philadelphia Phillies. Because of this, there weren't lofty expectations placed on them, especially playing in the ever-competitive American League East. But for Bautista, the 2010 season was everything, because after coming close to being let go, this was the deciding year of whether or not he could become a valuable asset to a major league team, or if his strong finish in 2009 was just a fluke. And this was the consensus opinion after he posted an underwhelming April, managing just a .214 average with a 741 OPS. However, for the rest of the season, there was nobody close to his level. In May, he carried the Jays to a 19-10 record by hitting 12 home runs and posting an almost 1200 OPS. Then the following month, on June 22nd, he had a 2-homer night against the St. Louis Cardinals, helping him eclipse the 20-homer mark for the first time in his career, doing so in less than 3 months of the season. And by the All-Star break, despite hitting a mere .237, his 24 home runs ranked first in baseball ahead of some of the game's most powerful hitters such as Adam Dunn and Miguel Cabrera. Furthermore, his .306 isolated power also ranked as the best in the league, adding even more proof that his power was finally starting to materialize. And all of this culminated in him becoming a reserve in the All-Star game for the first time in his career, a feat not many people believed were in the cards for him at the start of the season, which meant the baseball world was raving about José Bautista and his sudden rise to stardom. But instead of him being content with what he accomplished in the first half, he strived for more. He wanted to finish the year as a home run leader. He wanted to win the MVP award. So after the All-Star break, he kicked his game into second gear. And this was also around the time when I first went to the Rogers Center to watch the Jays unfortunately get crushed by the Red Sox. But I almost missed the game entirely because the tickets my mom and I bought had to be printed, so we went to the Toronto Public Library where we spent way too long trying to figure everything out. This is where today's sponsor SeatGeek makes it easy for you. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 ticketing app with more than 70,000 events. And me personally, I will be using their services to see the Blue Jays take on the Red Sox at Fenway in the next couple weeks. And with football kicking off next month, as well as touring artists such as Billie Eilish and Luke Combs, there is an event for everyone. SeatGeek also simplifies everything by putting all tickets across the web into one place to make sure you're getting a good deal. They also use their own deal score technology, which rates each ticket on a scale of 1 to 10, with green dots being good and red meaning they have better deals for you. And by using code GREENLIGHT at checkout, you get $20 off your purchase. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code GREENLIGHT. And make sure to click the link in the description to download the app for easy access to your tickets. Alright, now let's get back to Bautista's second half, with perhaps his best performance of the season coming on August 23rd when he took the game into his own hands by sending a go-ahead 2-run shot off Ivan Nova in the third, something Nova wasn't too pleased with, so for retaliation in the sixth, he knocked Bautista down with a high fastball, and in typical Bautista fashion, he did not like this and made sure to stare him down and say some words, causing benches to clear and both sides to get a warning, but he would get the last laugh as he hit the game-winning home run in the 8th inning off David Robertson. And after sending the ball into orbit, he made sure to stare down the pitcher and take 28 seconds to round the bases. At this moment, Bautista, if he hadn't already, won over the hearts of Jays fans by being the hero against their division rivals, but his stellar play didn't stop there. Just a month later, on September 16th, he hit his 47th homer of the season, tying the Blue Jays franchise record set by George Bell all the way back in 1987. But by the end of the campaign, Bautista stood alone at the top, managing 54, becoming the first Jay to ever eclipse 50 and just the 26th overall player in MLB history. Joining a club with some of the best players to grace the game, it was truly a season no one was ever expecting from the man who most thought was fizzling out of the game just the year prior, which meant Alex Anthopoulos Anthopoulos, the Jays general manager at the time, was at a crossroads on what to do with him, because Bautista was entering his final year of control and the club was not entering a contention window despite improving by 8 wins from the previous season. So he looked to see what his value was on the trade market, but when conversing with other front offices, there was a lot of skepticism surrounding his game, with the biggest concern about whether or not he was the real deal, or a guy like Brady Anderson who hit 50 homers in 1996 despite averaging 10 in his 14 other seasons. So after not liking his trade value, the club looked to ride out his final year of control and reassess after the season, but minutes before their arbitration meeting to decide how much he would be paid for 2011, the two sides agreed upon a massive 5-year $65 million extension. When news of this deal broke, it was met with disbelief by opposing agents asking the Jays GM if he was being serious and if he had lost his mind, which was a fair statement because Bautista was one of the worst players in the game for the greater part of his career, bouncing around team after team before his breakout 2010 campaign. But now with the weight of a hefty new price tag, it's fitting that he showed out, with 2011 being perhaps the most complete season of his career, because despite sending 11 less balls into the seats, he still led the league with 43, becoming the first player since Mark McGwire in 1998 and 1999 to lead the league in homers in back-to-back years, and he did this while also raising his batting average by 42 points, on base by 69, OPS by 61, and OPS plus by 18. Because of this, he was without question the most feared hitter on the planet, and pitchers didn't want to pitch to him, and instead opted to walk him 132 times, the most since Jason Giambi collected 137 11 years prior. But despite this, the Jays once again missed the playoffs at 81 and 81, a trend they looked poised to break. However, the next couple of years weren't smooth sailing for Bautista. In 2012, he injured his left wrist on a foul ball in July, forcing him out for 35 games, and when he tried to make a return later in the year, he left in his second game back and opted to undergo season-ending surgery to repair the issue. Then the following year, he left the Jays contest against the New York Yankees on August 20th due to a hip injury from colliding with the wall in right field, once again shutting him down for the rest of the year. This was frustrating for Bautista, who couldn't stay healthy and was forced to watch as his team continued to miss the playoffs. He also allowed this disappointment to boil over and affect his game, causing chatter to arise about his lackluster leadership, with it all stemming from his desire for success. A trait that every elite player has, but when it becomes too much, there can be a disconnect with teammates and coaches. And it was starting to show through, as he had countless meltdowns with umpires and ejections that hurt his team. He also famously said this regarding missed calls at the plate: "Sometimes I have trouble more than other players dealing with my production being affected by somebody else's mediocrity. It's just the way I am as a person. It's a tougher pill to swallow for me sometimes." This was directed at the umpires, but you can't help but think he was also referring to the Jays as a whole, who were yet to complement him with the players he needed to make the playoffs. But 2014 was different. Entering the year, the club acquired big-name players such as Jose Reyes, as well as Mark Burley from the Miami Marlins and R.A. Dickey from the New York Mets. All of this culminated in the club going 60 and 50 by the end of July, making them one of the two owners of a wildcard position and just 2.5 games back of the division leaders, the Baltimore Orioles. And Bautista was in the midst of yet another superb season with 21 homers, a .294 average, and a .933 OPS at this time. Additionally, he was having less confrontations with umpires after he disagreed with calls, and was offering help to the club's younger players such as pitcher Drew Hutchinson and center fielder Kevin Pillar, shutting down the thought of him not being a capable leader in the clubhouse. And as the season was drawing to a close, it seemed as though he was leading the Jays to the playoffs for the first time in over 20 years. But towards the end of the season, they started to crumble and ended up missing the postseason by 5 games after going 23 and 29 to finish the year. And because of their meltdown in the final 2 months, Bautista, who we already uncovered did not like losing, was upset about the Jays' inability to acquire anyone meaningful at the deadline, which makes sense, because the only move the Jays made was sending Liam Hendriks and Eric Kratz to the Kansas City Royals for infielder Danny Valencia, who posted just a .636 OPS in 50 games down the stretch, making it clear why the Jays crumbled out of playoff contention and why superstar players such as Bautista were frustrated by the club's lackluster attempt to get better at the deadline. But like the previous offseason, the Jays got a lot better, this time acquiring Josh Donaldson from the Oakland Athletics and Russell Martin through free agency, helping give the club one one of the most feared lineups in all of baseball. And even though the Jays were struggling to go beyond 500 at the deadline, it wasn't because of the offense. So when Anthopoulos made his final tweaks at the deadline by acquiring Troy Tulowitzki to shore up the lineup, David Price to anchor the rotation, and LaTroy Hawkins as another back-end bullpen piece, the Jays took off. And by the end of the season, they had gone from out of the playoff picture at 50-51 to erasing an 8-game deficit in the AL East at 93-69, marking the first time they were crowned division champion since 1993. This was it. Playoff baseball had finally resumed in Canada, and Blue Jays fans from all over flocked to the Rogers Center, where unbeknownst to them, they were about to witness one of the craziest division series in recent baseball memory. But to fully grasp this story, we need to go back to Game 3, where the AL West champions, the Texas Rangers, were heading home needing one more win to advance to the championship series, making it seem as though the Jays' first time back in the playoffs would be cut short. But instead, backed by a strong pitching performance by Marco Estrada in Game 3 and an onslaught of runs by the Jays offense in Game 4, the series moved back to Toronto for the winner-take-all Game 5 matchup, where all eyes were on Bautista and whether or not he could shine when the lights got the brightest. And following the top of the 7th inning, in which Russell Martin's throwback to the pitcher struck Shin Choo-Choo's bat and resulted in the go-ahead run scoring from third base, the stadium erupted, with fans throwing beer cans, bottles, and many more items onto the field. But as they stood watching their team's playoff hopes evaporate, Bautista stepped up to the plate with the ability to cement his legacy as a Toronto Blue Jay.
1-1 from Tyson. Bautista with a drag. Deep left field. No doubt about it.
You can only play with fire for so long, and it's going to burn you.
The Blue Jays dugout has erupted as they greet Bautista at the edge of the track.
Words cannot describe this moment, because when all hope was lost, who else but the man who would become the face of the franchise for the last half-decade came through with one of the most clutch homers in Jays franchise history. And after Roberto Osuna shut the door on the Rangers to punch their ticket into the championship series, it seemed like it was this team's destiny to hoist the World Series trophy, and once again Bautista looked to create more playoff magic as he single-handedly brought the Jays back in Game 6 of the ALCS, managing to hit a solo homer to cut the Royals lead in half in the 4th inning, and then a 2-run shot in the 8th to tie the game up at 3 apiece. But as he stood in the on-deck circle in the top of the 9th, hoping to make one final contribution, Josh Donaldson grounded out to end the game as well as their season. It was a disappointing finish for the Jays, who most favored as a team to go all the way at the start of the championship series, but with the same core players under contract for 2016, all eyes were on the start of the next season. But unlike years past, it was under a new front office. Mark Shapiro took over for Paul Beeston as CEO/president, and Ross Atkins replaced Alex Anthopoulos as general manager. This was a bittersweet moment in Toronto, as Anthopoulos had done a great job bringing playoff baseball back to Canada, and if it wasn't for his gutsy move to go all in at the deadline in 2015, it's likely that team would have never made the playoffs. However, under new control by Mark Shapiro, he was initially scrutinized for trading their top prospects and was set to have less control over the team's operations going forward, so he left, leaving the team with a new way things were done. And the first order of business in spring training was to sit down with Bautista, who is a pending free agent, and go over what it would take for him to sign an extension, to which he stated how he already signed a hometown discount by massively outperforming his first deal, and that he would not be negotiating. Either they met his figure or they didn't. But at the time, he was 35 and searching for a 9-figure payday, and looking elsewhere on the team, Encarnacion was also getting older and a soon-to-be free agent, Tulowitzki was already getting paid big, and Donaldson's contract was ever growing through arbitration. Because of this, the two sides could not string a deal together and decided to reassess at the end of the season, and boy was it a difficult one for Bautista, as he dealt with a turf toe injury, a knee sprain, and lingering shoulder issues from the previous few years, holding him to only 116 games. On top of this, his offensive numbers took a massive hit, with his lowest home run total, average, and OPS since his breakout 2010 campaign. However, he did make his presence known in the playoffs with his home run off Chris Tillman in the bottom of the 2nd inning in the wildcard game, giving Encarnacion the chance to shine with his walk-off homer in the bottom of the 10th inning. Then in the Jays sweep of the Rangers in the ALDS, he managed an RBI single in the 3rd inning and 3-run homer in the 9th to help obliterate the Rangers 10-1. But it was once again the championship series where the Jays were eliminated as they fell to Cleveland in 5 games. And following the Cubs' Game 7 comeback victory over Cleveland in the World Series, Bautista was officially a free agent for the first time in his career. But instead of the lucrative contract he was playing himself towards over the previous few years, his down 2016 season combined with lingering injuries meant there wasn't a mass appeal for him. And in the end, he re-signed on a 1-year deal worth $18.5 million with a mutual option for the 2018 season and vesting for 2019. This is a common tactic used by players who have down seasons in their contract year. For example, Marcus Semien finished 3rd place in MVP voting after clubbing 33 homers with an almost 900 OPS in 2019, before having a down year in 2020, managing just a 679 OPS, which meant he too wasn't met with many suitors in free agency. So he signed a 1-year deal in Toronto for the 2021 season to build his value back up. And after setting the record number of home runs for a second baseman at 45, as well as another 3rd place finish in MVP voting, he was awarded the lucrative payday he was seeking for, signing a 7-year, $175 million pact with the Texas Rangers. This was what Bautista was aiming to do in 2017, except instead of building up his value, it continued to plummet, because despite playing in 157 games, his most since all the way back in 2010, he managed just 23 home runs, a 674 OPS, and 170 strikeouts, marking the first time in his career he struck out on average of more than once per game. On top of this, his batting average of .203 ranked as the worst figure among all qualified hitters in the league, showing that his best days were behind him and that the 2017 season would be his last as a Jay. So in his final home game, the team made sure to make it memorable. His teammate Marcus Stroman got fans inside Rogers Center amped up during his warm-ups by wearing a black number 19 Bautista jersey, the one he used to wear when he first arrived at the club. His walk-up song for the majority of his career, Trophies by Drake, was used when it was time for the Jays to take the field. And instead of the whole team going as one, they let Bautista run out to right field on his own, where fans inside Rogers Center cheered as he made his first play in the field, retiring Todd Frazier in the 2nd inning. And on the other side of the ball, Bautista managed to come through in the clutch with a bases-loaded single in the bottom of the 4th inning to drive in his final run of his Blue Jays career. Then, as the game drew to a close with 2 outs in the top of the 9th, John Gibbons made the move to replace him with Ezekiel Carrera, and as Bautista ran back to the dugout, he made sure to hug all of his teammates as well as wave to the fans one final time. This was a special send-off to one of the most beloved Blue Jays players in franchise history, and sure enough, once free agency rolled around, the Jays decided to decline their side of the mutual option, officially ending his career up north, and what a career it was. In terms of Jays history, Bautista ranks among the leaders in most offensive categories. For example, in home runs, he ranks 2nd to Carlos Delgado with 288. Additionally, his single-season mark of 54 still stands atop the club's list despite Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s best efforts in 2021, and this helped him finish with the most WAR among field players at 38.3. It's also hard not to talk about his infamous rivalry with the Baltimore Orioles when discussing his Jays career, because it was a feud that even made the fans of the Orioles plead for their front office not to sign him after the 2016 season. And it all started on June 22, 2013, when he launched a 2-run homer in the 8th inning off Darren O'Day, and as he rounded third base, he made a keep yapping gesture with his hand because he said that O'Day was running his mouth the day prior after striking him out. And this rivalry would continue throughout the next couple of years, including O'Day hitting him in 2014, but like Bautista's feud with the Yankees, he got the last laugh. Because although he continued to get thrown at in 2015, he followed up each time by hitting a 2-run homer. And on September 30th, he launched his 40th long ball of the season, helping the Jays steamroll the Orioles 15-2 on the day they clinched their first division title in over 20 years. It was moments like these which made Jays fans everywhere fall in love with his ability to back up his big personality, but as with most, all good things must come to an end at some point, and that was the 2018 season. On April 18th, he signed with the Atlanta Braves on a 1-year deal worth $1 million and slotted in at third base with occasional days at DH. But after underperforming in his 12 games, hitting just 143, he was released, allowing the New York Mets to scoop him up. And while he did improve at the plate with a .351 on base percentage in 83 games, including hitting his first career walk-off home run, he was once again switching teams, this time being traded to the Philadelphia Phillies, where he would go on to to end the year excelling as a pinch hitter with a 404 on base percentage in 57 plate appearances, giving him a final slash line which was an improvement upon his final Jays season, except at 37 years old it was nowhere close to the level of production he would need to continue to find work in MLB. But that didn't stop him from playing baseball as a whole. In 2020, videos surfaced on Marcus Stroman's social media pages where Bautista was seen throwing off the mound. Stroman would later reveal he was working with him in hopes of him returning to MLB as a two-way player. He also mentioned he had good stuff and that his fastball was in the 90s. But in a radio interview with MLB Network, Bautista stated that he wasn't actively pursuing the opportunity to pitch professionally. And ever since he stepped away, he has dabbled in a little bit of everything. Firstly, with the extra free time, he's enjoyed spending it with his family, where he has felt privileged to be a father. And professionally, he was named as a special advisor to the general manager for a team down in the Dominican Professional Baseball League. He has also followed his passion of soccer by purchasing the Las Vegas Lights, who play in the second division of the US soccer pyramid. But back to baseball, because on August 12, 2023, he signed a one-day contract to retire as a Blue Jay and become just the 11th player to join their level of excellence. And during his ceremony, everyone who helped him along the way was in attendance, such as former managers Cito Gaston and John Gibbons, as well as a few guys from their 2 playoff runs. They were all there to celebrate his impressive legacy and make it known to him just how appreciated he was. Then after everyone had their say, it was Bautista's turn.
And I want to thank the Blue Jays fans, the city of Toronto, and the whole country. It was an honor to play for you.
Despite his best efforts to hide it through his sunglasses, it was clear he was tearing up throughout the whole ceremony, but could you blame him? Because for the first 5 years of his career, he bounced around team after team hoping to get an opportunity which never came. But when he arrived in Toronto, he was finally able to make the necessary adjustments to realize his potential, and during his 10-year stay, he became one of the most feared hitters in the game.